Hey everyone, greetings and welcome to the virtual Dalcroze meetup. It is April 19 in Pittsburgh today, and I am so pleased to welcome everyone. My name is Stephen Neely. I'm your co-host for the virtual Dalcroze meetup. I'm centered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at Carnegie Mellon University, and my dear co-hosts, Emma Schuben of Integral Steps in Colorado and Veronica Bolesky, my founding partner for the meetup in Boston. So we are so happy to have everybody together. We've got a really interesting agenda today. And but before we get to all of that, our routine is to take just 3 minutes to greet each other and to sort of meet some of our neighbors, often from around the world. So I'm going to send you to a breakout room. Hold on, let me quickly crank this up. That looks good. And when you get to the breakout room, I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell everybody where you're located, where do you live, and who do you teach, or who do you wish you taught? And those are the three things we're to share. With your neighbor, your name, where are you located, and who do you teach? And I will assign my co-host while you're out. We'll see you in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. All right, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had just enough time to be frustrated. To be frustrated that you didn't get to talk more with whoever those people were, because
Stephen loves to make us feel frustrated.
that's what we do, isn't it? Just give you just enough, and then wish you could have more. I feel like that's every great Eurythmics experience I've ever been in.
Make this like times 4.
Right.
Introductions.
So it's so good to have everyone together. I think we have an announcement or two, Veronica.
Yes. So we still have 3 more sessions of Virtual Dance with Dawn, which begin next weekend. So if you'd like to join us for that, you're all very welcome. And of course, all the previous sessions are available on recording, and so you can buy all of them, or you can buy just three at a time. All the previous master classes, including Iramar's fabulous master class this weekend, are all available. And of course, we have scholarships available. I recently found out that some people thought they were only for Dalcroze teachers. So please spread the word that you don't have to be a Dalcroze person or a Dalcroze teacher to receive a scholarship. And Virtual Dalcroze meetups and masterclasses season 4 will return in June and July. Stay tuned.
We've got some nice ideas cooking around, so we're very excited about it. Emma, you should say hi just for a second, just while we're all taking turns here.
Hello, I don't know where I'm heading to. There I am. I am Emma Schuben. I'm the director of Integral Steps. I am honored to be a co-host with my dear friends Veronica and Stephen. What an amazing year this has been on so many levels, and what joy it has been to gather with you guys for each class and meet up. And I do definitely recommend coming to Dance with Dawn. I'm there every week, and it makes a difference in my day, to say the very least, and it really changes the tone of my week. So I recommend you guys join us. And we offer scholarships, because that is one of the things, as directing a nonprofit, I have the privilege of helping support. And so if anyone out there needs support, let us know. We want to help.
Very good. Thank you. Well, we were talking some weeks ago, I think it was actually in a meetup, where the little topic of sort of making your own job, making your own way, finding ways to be a Dalcrozian in the community came up, and it was just noted that there's a couple sort of obvious paths, and then there's all sorts of other options that are maybe less obvious. And so I think obvious would be, wouldn't it be nice if I was in a certain city where everybody in that town seemed to know what Eurythmics was, and they were just all advertising, we want a Dalcroze teacher to come and join our school. And actually, there are a couple of those cities around the world, but it's actually pretty rare for a school to advertise, we're looking for a Dalcrozian. But that's one sort of obvious path if you can find it. And then a second path is there are schools who teach music or who are looking for music teachers. And so sometimes we as Dalcrozians will go to that school and say, hey, I hear you're looking for a music teacher. What you really should want is a Dalcroze music teacher, not just a music teacher, because we bring all sorts of extra things to the table. And so there's sort of like a second path there where someone else already has a school or has a group of students already amassed. Either it's in a public school or a private school or a extracurricular program. And they know they want a music teacher, but they didn't know they wanted you exactly. And so we then push our way in. And then there's a third category where we think, oh, I'm in this certain town and I know there's schools around. They don't actually give music because they just haven't made the right connection. I'll be the connection. So I go to the Montessori school, or I go to the Waldorf school, or I go to so-and-so Sally's School of Flaming Baton and Dance. And I say, you know what you really need is some music classes taught through these movement methods. You should hire me to come and be the person and we'll make stuff happen. And so sometimes we find inroads that way. And I know growing up in my teaching, I did all of those things. I've taught in the public schools, I've taught in private schools, I've taught in extracurricular sort of settings. I went to the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, and told them they should bring me in to open a whole new set of classes with their kids. All of that are things we've done. What I think has often been harder to recognize, especially for a lot of us who just aren't always wired this way, is that there's all sorts of ways of sort of creating your own programs, like from scratch, where you don't have to jump on somebody else's thing, but you actually could sort of envision ways of doing your own. And so today we've asked Guy Mendelow and Emma Schuben to kick it off today by just telling us a little bit about sort of what we've discussed is that maybe they would tell us a little bit of some of their early inroads to teaching, and then where are they now and what sorts of projects are they doing now? And if they could just give us a little bit of that story, I think there'll be plenty here for us to discuss as they get going. Is there anything else Veronica or anybody wanted to add before we just turn it over to Guy for a couple minutes?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
That's good. Okay, so then we hand the platform over to Guy for, I think, Guy, you got 10 minutes to just tell us a little bit about, and I would love it if you could tell us a little bit of what you used to do and then help us understand how you got to the kinds of things you're currently investigating and working on.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen just to get us started. Is everybody able to see the screen? Well, thanks for having me here, and thank you for asking this question, which is, it's an interesting time to ask this question because the past year has been unlike any year that I've had, any year that any of us have had, certainly with ramifications for teaching. In terms of where I'm coming from, I come from a family of educators. My mother is a Montessori teacher. My father is a professor of political science and political theory. And when I graduated from Oberlin College, I at first determined that I would never be an educator because that's what I'd grown up with. And not for me, no thank you. And instead I wanted to be an activist. And I was asking myself all kinds of lofty questions that my professors were challenging me with, questions about paradigm shifts, questions about leadership. And the more that I started to break that down into specific ingredients, the more it occurred to me that, oh, hang it all. Actually, teaching music could be a solution and could be a viable pathway. And I became interested in Dalcroze basically out of an activist mentality. Dalcroze, towards the end of his life, was committed to this idea, even before the end of his life, was committed to this idea of not just teaching music, but teaching through music. And that's what first drew me in. And it's strange because now I have no interest in that, primarily because I realized that teaching music is itself, can be itself a revolutionary act and is itself a pathway to so much that I hold beautiful and that I hold true and that I hold towards pathways of greater harmony and health. And so it's funny how that's gone. But in terms of specific work, my first teaching was on the Navajo Reservation in Crown Point, New Mexico, in Four Corners, teaching at a BIA school. And after that, I constructed my own programs that I brought to various schools, kind of like what Stephen was saying. For 10 years, I directed a music program at a progressive independent school here in Arlington, Massachusetts. I tour, and that's kind of my full-time job. And so along with that, I was giving master classes and all kinds of arts and education programs. And so it's like everything that Stephen's just said, the three major pathways, in one way or another, I've tangled with the exception of the first. I've never really been in a city where people knew what Delcros was and sought Delcros teachers. In 2017, I launched the Delcros Music School of Boston, and some of the thinking that went into that had to do with ecosystems. Specifically, it occurred to me that Delcros itself belongs in a musical ecosystem, but cannot satisfy every niche of that ecosystem. So what is the musical ecosystem? Well, musicianship, and this is what Delcros education contributes, I think, in a particularly adept way, in my opinion, because of the principles and strategies that drive it, and because of the questions that were at the inception of this approach. Other parts of the ecosystem are places to apply. So, you know, it's very well and good to teach Delcros, but in the end, I believe that nobody really cares. What they care about is musicianship, and what they really care about is applying that musicianship. So who is it that applies musicianship? Well, this is not an exhaustive list, but there are, of course, choirs and orchestras, there are marching bands, there are bands of all stripes, people engaged in musical theater, people engaged in private study. These are all places where musicianship can be applied. And a big part of this kind of musical ecosystem also is the motivation. What is it that motivates, what is it that keeps you coming back to the place where you apply your musicianship? So again, not an exhaustive list, but for example, I know that for many choirs, my child is in a choir, and a big thing about that choir is not just the music. Yes, they love to sing, but a big part of it is the social community. They come back because their friends are there. Performance can be a motivator for some, especially to work, you know, as a resume builder for students or people who are entering into a career in performance. Certainly finance can be a motivator. There can be spiritual motivators. Many people sing in choirs in church, and it is their way of contributing spiritually. And of course, music is its own motivator. And this is not an exhaustive list, but the idea is the linkages. So musicianship certainly contributes to the application, right? The more I am fluent, the more I am fluid in this conversation called music, the more I can track the conversation and participate in it creatively, the more I get out of my choir, my orchestra, etc. I have a choral background, so I'm specifically interested in choirs, and these are the organizations with which I sought to work. Of course, goes the other way around. The more that I want to get out of my choral experience, the more I'm driven to seek more musicianship. Well, the motivation is the thing that often keeps me coming back. In my case, chorally, it was when I was a boy, I toured with the American Boy Choir School, and the main motivation there was musical, but also social. But it's the other way around as well. All these become, you can see how all these begin to become closed networks, closed feedback loops. One feeds the other, one feeds the other. And so the question for me became, with the Delcros Music School of Boston, is how can I create an organization that ties into those closed feedback loops? In my case, it became clear that I was not just interested in the typical a la carte model, but I was interested in organizational relationships. People come and go, organizations endure, and so it made sense to ally the school or to seek partnerships with organizations that could apply the musicianship skills that Delcros was training in organizations that had built-in motivators. So for example, in Boston, there are many children's choruses and choirs. And it began to make sense to look at partnerships with such organizations. I think one of the takeaways, though, for me is that you can look at this ecosystem in terms of questions, not only in terms of answers. And the first question is, what do you give? The second question is, well, who would benefit from what you give? Who around you do you already know? With whom do you already have relationships? What is in your background of people that can use the type of musicianship skills that Delcros trains? And then when we look at these people, what is it that moves them? What do they really want, and how can we plant it in their backyard? These are questions I think that we can answer no matter where we are, no matter whether we're interested in starting a school or starting a small program or allying with a church choir or a temple choir or whatever it is that is already in our midst. Who is it that can use the tremendous musicianship skills that Delcros can give? Now, for me, these questions got funneled into more of an elaborate business plan. And this is called the business model canvas. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Oh. This is the business model canvas, which is a very useful tool. It speaks in a way that I don't. I speak in questions often. So I translated the questions that led to the ecosystemic thinking to this, and those are in the green, beginning with, what do we give? And answering, well, who is it that we give to? These would be the customers. That's kind of the thought architecture of the Delcros Music School of Boston. And of course, all this needs to get translated to specifics and to context. It's well and good to tell a story from 30,000 feet above the ground, but that's not what a school does. A school operates on the ground. And so all this, of course, needs to get translated into various storytelling tools like budgets. That really break it down. And the way that I see it is that if for what we're looking at right now, it's kind of the plan. The next step is to break it down into the specific Lego bricks that create that plan and that go into setting it up. What are all the tiny, tiny, tiny ingredients? But that's basically the thinking. I'm happy to answer questions. I know that I've spoken about it pretty generally, but to me, I think that the idea of where we begin, the idea of asking these questions, the idea of realizing that on the one hand, nobody really cares about Delcros because nobody really knows what Delcros is, except in certain select cities. But that doesn't matter. People recognize what Delcros gives, and Delcros is particularly adept at giving that. So how can we craft that narrative to meet the needs of the people who would benefit from the musicianship skills, from the other skills that Delcros gives? And for that, I think that there are all kinds of novel answers. Here I'll end, but I'm happy to answer questions both now and afterwards.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Guy. There's lots for us to talk about in there. And I think that was a great overview. And then we have, I know, no shortage of things that we want to know more of as you go. But let's get Emma into the mix to tell her version of a similar story. So Emma, actually, I think this is I'm embarrassed actually that it took us this long to actually ask Integral Steps to talk a little bit about what Integral Steps is. I assume a bunch of people who have been attending have sort of looked up the Integral Steps website and snooped around a little bit, but we really should have found a way to introduce Integral Steps just as an entity long before this. So tell us a little bit of the origin story and where you are now.
Absolutely. So hi, everybody. My name is Emma Schuben. I'm a flutist. I'm a Delcros teacher, a Suzuki educator, and I also run a little nonprofit called Integral Steps. This nonprofit was founded because I was in classrooms with students in the various forums that we were discussing with Stephen a little earlier, and I would get a lot of information. I think our method does a great job at showing us where people are in time and space. And so I would see little Joey doing X, Y, and Z, or I'd notice something about Shira in my classroom. And I felt that I was falling short to help the families, to support the families of the students that I had, to help them better know about how their child learned, what the growth possibilities were. And I could see this doorway through Delcros and our education system of really using all of our senses and developing through all of our senses to really support a child or an individual, a family, a community in a different way and a more holistic approach. And so when I met my partner, her name is Alejandra Hudon, she's a developmental psychologist. We had some wonderful conversations. We'd known each other for quite some time. I knew that she worked with families and children. And one day we just happened to pass each other on a way into a movement class, and we sat and we had a conversation. And she said, you know, I work with my families every day and I give them lots of ideas, but they don't ever have an experience in my session of what it would be like to put some of these ideas into practice in the real world. And I was having the opposite experience. I was giving lots of experiences to my kids, but no ways to give feedback to the families about how this might be an idea or the germination of something that could help them see their children in a different way or help them know something about themselves in a different way. And so we thought, well, we would like to try an experiment. So off we went to her mental health organization. We did a series of workshops for children and their parents where we would try a movement-based class on a topic, followed by an art session that had something to do with that subject, followed by the parents having a little talk back session while the kids got another experience from me. And so the goal of these sessions were to engage the kids kinesthetically, emotionally, and cognitively during this time, to have the parents involved in that whole process and to give the parents space to have reflection and to have some growth through what they saw about their own work with their kids, how their children were doing in those sessions, what they noticed, what they were able to observe. So it was more real life. And so that's a nutshell of where Integral Steps started from. But this idea of us not existing in a vacuum, to me, has been such an important part of my flute playing life and my performing life. Delcros really transformed my relationship to the music, to my own body, and therefore made me feel so much more connected to my music and my audiences that I would have people ask me, you know, who did you study with? What's your training? And they wanted to know something about what was happening behind the scenes of that polished performance that they would see. Because to me, it allowed a gateway for me to really communicate in a different way. And I grew up as a musician in a family of wonderful musicians and also non-musicians, but no matter what, there was always a very busy life of lots of people coming through. We're a very typical Eastern European family in that way, that there's always somebody coming to stay, there's always a concert happening, there's always the next thing going, lots of creativity and a lovely family, but also like this hunger to be connected to more than beyond my little microcosm. So if I fast forward a bit, I received a degree in sciences because I have a degree in ecology and evolutionary biology, not because I thought that I would become a biologist, but because I was interested in how my little personal story relates to the story of the larger world around me. And so when I founded Integral Steps, there was this wish to work with my colleague in a way that addressed not only the body and the mind and the emotions, but then also how that works on an individual level within a family unit and then in a community. And it was as much for the students as it was for ourselves. My partner and I found that having a chance to work with these principles of kind of this multi-faceted and multimodal way of learning gave us an opportunity to share the knowledge that we had in our own individual kind of microcosm with each other, and gave such a rich diversity to the people we were working with that we wanted to grow that. So we developed a fellowship. That's how we met and had Veronica come on board. I had known her as a flutist and a wonderful Dalcroze colleague, but she was looking for a different experience. And eventually that also led to this idea that for me, the strength of a system comes not just from the skill set that I have, but from the idea that something like Dalcroze or this idea of working in a more holistic way allows for a connection and opportunity to grow much stronger through partnerships. And so most of what we do is develop connections between organizations or between ourselves and other organizations to hopefully help support this kind of balanced idea of a model really growing and becoming something that can really support and sustain a community. And I'm really honored that the virtual Delcros meetup is what would be at like the pinnacle of that, is a place where we can gather here and share ideas, is something that Integral Steps is like, what part of our mission is really why we're here, is the opportunity to make these kinds of connections. And so I think that when I started as a Delcros student, it was a very self-serving thing. I stepped into a classroom and thought to myself, somebody teaches the way I learn? Like it was such a moment for me, and I think we all have had some moment like that, which is why we're here perhaps. But then also the idea that we could touch a student's life in a different way that brings them away from their habit, potentially, or maybe the way that they always have done things, and opens a doorway for them to grow in a new way, for me is not just about the student in the classroom, but it can happen within a small group or a larger community. And so when these events are created, and for us it might be an event at the local coffee shop where there's music being played and arts and crafts being celebrated around a certain holiday and families are gathering, that experience can be as transformative as the greatest Delcros class I've been part of, as can be this conversation that we're having today. So for me, that aspect of realizing that this work gives me tools to see those opportunities and to see those connections has allowed me to kind of realize some parts of my life that I always wished for. I grew up going to music festivals. The Apple Hill Center for Chamber Music is in Keene, New Hampshire, and its whole impetus is playing for peace. And they would give scholarships to students from warring countries, from Israel and Palestine, from Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And these students would come together and make something together, make music together, and learn how to communicate differently. And so for me, growing up and kind of being immersed in a world where this language that we speak, and in this idiom we do it through music, but it really can be any idiom, that idea of connecting and learning how to communicate in more than one way allows something to open up as far as the connection that I feel for my fellow person or my fellow human that I'm with. And then there is no limit, in my opinion, to what is possible. And as a flutist, we are often trained for a position in an orchestra that doesn't exist. There are many less orchestras than there once were. And so for me, there was this wish in my own world to get away from the idea of like fighting over the same piece of cheese that everybody else was fighting over, and instead to just step aside and say, well, what happens if we just made more cheese? And so I would say at the heart of Integral Steps, at least, but then also just for myself, what this work has done is this opportunity to make a lot more cheese. And so that's my short, but
it's very good. Very good. There's so many things that we don't have nearly enough time for either of you or all. I want to just, before we start asking questions about either of these or other alternative models, I want to just say that we didn't design today's conversation in any way to diminish what it means to be in one of the first three models, first of all. So if you happen to have a neighborhood organization that was looking for a music teacher, God bless you, and how wonderful that you had that opportunity and have a way to use your skills there, because it's wonderful. And I love my public school teaching. Like, all of those gigs have been amazing for me as an individual. So in no way is this supposed to be some sort of value judgment on any of that. The idea was just that we've been talking more and more behind the scenes about, well, what about all the communities where there is no Delcros presence in the community culture? And so what sorts of ways could any individual sort of make some inroads or make ways of using this work in whatever their community is? And I think what Guy and Emma have put together are two sort of, to my mind, sort of extreme examples or big examples of, like, there's a lot going on. And then I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of small steps between I teach flute lessons from my living room, and I'm going to pull my flute studio together, and we're going to do a little bit of music and movement under a Dalcroze model, which is a beautiful way to start. And then all the way to, I've created my own 501c3, and we're applying for grant funding, and we're partnering with other international organizations. I mean, there's quite a range in there. So as you heard either of them present, what questions popped up, or what sort of comments did it make you think of? Who has something to sort of chime in? What do you think? Jeanette?
Thank you. I just want to ask Emma, what exactly does your organization do then when you say you connect with other groups, make connections? So do you mean you actually go to a party of some kind to give them a session, or just make connections with them? Can you give some
Great
examples,
question.
please?
So I'll give 3 separate examples. Currently, we have programming where you can bring your baby daughter to class with me and or another teacher, and we'll do a music and movement class. So there's something that would just kind of be a music focused class, and that will be your thing, your 45-minute class. But we also have an opportunity for you to come with your child to a program of ours, and you take a 30-minute Spanish and integrated art class, or a 30-minute biology and integrated art class. And then back to back, we'll explore the same topic, but through music and movement, so through Dalcroze. And so the child and the family will have an exposure kind of through this idea of an intellectual, an emotional, and a kinesthetic way to a subject such as melody or growth. And so like that might be a class that you come to every week with us. On a different level, you might be engaging in private flute instruction, but your enrichment class or part of your musicianship training is a weekly rhythmic solfege class. In another aspect, you might see Integral Steps in the community offering a celebration for spring that's centered around Passover and Easter, and come and celebrate with us. We're going to be doing crafts that are around rabbits and crafts that are around baking, and here's our theme for the day, and we'll have music from a community member or a band or some students who have prepared really hard to come and play for you in between this activity and that activity. And so there's a performance element for the students who have come. There's something for the grandparents to enjoy. The parents are getting to hang out and eat their, croissants and drink their lattes, that sort of thing. And they're having a really educational and deep experience. Or here we are, and yet a very different scenario where Integral Steps might be helping to be kind of the fabric that either supports the registration or is the financial help on the back end of a project that connects and integrates a couple different great ideas for how we could learn something. So that could be the virtual Dalcroze meetup, or for example, we've done some integrated flute workshops. I happen to be a flutist, so some of these things are a little more flute related, but where we had Alexander technique, we had Dalcroze, we had Feldenkrais along with flute technique and orchestral classes and community music building, improvisation, that sort of thing. And so that might be like a workshop series that is being hosted.
So do you already have an existing clientele of flute students, and then you draw from other instruments learning, like music students, to join maybe a workshops, like that? Yeah.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I mean, when we started things,
like where do you have to spend a lot of time to look for clientele, or do you have an existing clientele?
I think on the practical side of things, I think what we present to the world on the internet, of course it's important, but the mom network, if you're looking at like children's age classes, to me is still the most powerful thing. People want to go where other people are. So the more things I do in the community at the local, very, very popular bread shop, where I can meet people and talk to them and say hello, and they get to see their teacher and they get to connect with the person who puts together the partnerships and the organization of the classes. the more likely they are to sign their kid up because they feel like, oh yes, I know who you are. And yes, some of these students have come just for a private lesson, but then they see how much more their child learns through a musicianship lens of getting to educate the whole, that once they start in our programming, we keep most of our students all the way through their training. And so that to us is like, it's well worth the investment to go and find people and to really connect with them on a very personal level and to take the time to do that, rather than dumping a lot into kind of like internet market stuff, although we do a chunk of that as well. We make sure that people can come and find us, they can see what our programming is, they can call somebody, they can try a class out, they can see that information. But by and large, I would say, if I had a great experience, I'm going to call Guy up and say, Guy, you have to go check this out. You want to go and, you know, if I took Guy's class, I would want immediately to tell my friend Steven that he had to go and check out what Guy was up to. And I think we kind of, it's very easy to get distracted by trying to make sure that you have the right press kit. It's important, but more important I have found is the fact that I connected with that one family who had another family who really wanted something similar and asked their trusted friend, and their friend said, hey, I recommend this. So there's my long answer to your short question, Jeanette. But
there you go. Good. Who else? What else can we ask or talk about here? As we just think about models for teaching. Veronica.
I would actually love to ask Guy his experiences with same question that Jeanette asked, which is how do you feel out that this idea you have for partnership has the traction to run and be successful? How do you say, yes, we're going to pursue this? Like, I can feel that either we'll get enough signups or that like this organization is willing to work with us and a good contract can be made here that will benefit both.
And can I just add on, my understanding of some of Guy's model is that you're looking to partner with organizations that are already kind of in place, like a choir that's already a choir. You're not making a choir, you're partnering with choirs or with orchestras or with theater companies or such. Is that correct?
It is, yes, that's right. It's the question is who is already on the ground that could use these skills? Who cares and wants musicianship? Whose mission would be better served, and whose experience would be enhanced through the kind of musicianship skills that Delcors offers. Partnership is tricky. Partnership is long-term, and it requires an investment of time and attention and resource. And so you want to be careful about who you partner with. And so, you know, sometimes you begin a conversation with the organization and it seems like there's a good chemistry, but that needs to be investigated. And we have, you know, right now during the pandemic, I have to say nothing is happening, but in non-pandemic times, one of the ways that a partnership can be evaluated, first of all, is observation in a lot of questions. You want to avoid assumptions and be in the inquisitive mode, in the inquiry mode. You want to look at what's going on the ground. What is their structure? You want a mutual, I mean, I call it I don't call it this out loud, but internally, I call it a mutual audition process. Everybody has to audition one another, right? It has to be a good fit. But the important thing is, and this is where Delcors teachers, I think, and artists often fall, we are used to being auditioned, but we're not used to doing the auditioning. And, excuse me, my CEO. We have to put ourselves in the mindset of doing the audition as well. And the possibility that this partnership will actually require too much time and attention and resource, or will be too messy or whatever. And it has to be all right to say, you know what, we've gone through this mutual audition process and actually no, it's not a good fit. And we're not going to go in this direction, because to do the opposite can be really costly. Some of this is also trial and error. Like, how do you realize? Well, you make a lot of mistakes. Sometimes you can think things through only to a point. Then reality takes over. And so sometimes, yeah, you know, especially for an organization that's starting out, Veronica, sometimes you go through all the steps and it looks like it's really promising and it falls flat for whatever reason. Maybe it's driven by a key person in the other organization, and that person transitions to a new job, and the momentum is gone. And so the next time you learn to ask better questions and to look for telltale signs so that that thing doesn't happen again. Does that make sense?
What that makes me think of is that's a beautiful lesson, not only for something as large as some of the projects that have already been discussed, but that's also the same model for, well, I think what we worded is like number 2 or number 3 of those early ideas is to say, I'm going to approach a school and say, you know what you need me. And we're going to it's just going to be me. I'm going to come and teach a couple classes for your school. But then you realize that the person who's running that school, they don't actually believe in you, or they don't value the work that you offer, and they don't get it. They don't understand really what it means. And so when I've been in that position, some of the time I just have to cut and run. You're just oh, then it's not going to be. And then other times I've looked for ways to help them understand what is the value that I'm bringing. And if I can just get them to get it, then all of a sudden all sorts of new energy can take place. But that same idea is that there's a mutual audition. And I sometimes had found myself in situations where the other person just thought they were auditioning me. And it hadn't occurred to me that, no, wait a second, I'm also auditioning you. And so I think that's really valuable.
But this is where specificity and context really matter. And like everything that I was talking about, and I think that everything that Emma is talking about, it all comes down to clarity of specificity and context, because the more you can answer the question, develop an avatar for the person that you want to work with. If it's a choir, not all choirs are the same, and they're not all built the same, and they don't all care about the same things. So it's not good enough to just say a choir. What choir? What does it look like? What does it smell like? Who are these people? And the more clearly the answer is, the more you can already kind of weed out a lot. If it's not your ideal, it doesn't mean that outliers don't happen. Sometimes there's the X factor. It's you know what, you're not my avatar. You don't fit into the profile of the organization that I really seek. But it's awesome, and the chemistry is there, and there's no reason not to. So we're now we're expanding our model. Okay, fine, but go into this cautiously and with skepticism. By the way, I'm going to share in the chat the business model canvas that I showed you, and the reason I'm sharing that is that no matter what level you're at, whether it's on Emma's scale or whatever level, I think that the questions are generally the same, and that's because I think that there's a set of principles that govern these questions. And those principles can scale up or scale down. The strategies to solving those questions or to answering those questions shift. The questions themselves don't. And that's why I think that something like the business model canvas is such a useful tool, because no matter what level it's at, those questions can be tangled with. And the more they're answered with specificity, the more the context is elaborated, the better off.
Very good. Thank you so much, Guy. Isabel, you've had your hand up. Oh, we're not hearing you, Isabel. So I see that you're unmuted, but something maybe with your earbuds or
now?
your... Yes, now we've got you. Yep.
Okay. Hello, thank you. Well, I want to share something. I hope my ideas are clear for you. First, I want to thank you, because this group is so amazing. I have learned a lot. And being able to participate in these virtual meetings gave me the empowerment to start to put in motion a lot of projects I had in mind for a quite long time. So I'm very happy. Here in Mexico, music is very I don't know, schools don't want to pay a music teacher. They want to pay $2 the hour. They want the music teachers being disponibles, able to respond 24/7. Yeah, and they don't give us. They pay us per hour. Literally, $2 the hour. So it's so difficult for music teachers here to realize we have that power that just Stephen said. We are also the teachers. We are valuing the schools, and it's difficult for us realizing we have the power to say, no, you have to pay this, you have to recognize my education, my preparation, and if you don't want to pay that, so sorry, I'm going to leave. But it's very difficult because we don't have the herramientas, I'm sorry,
The tools, herramientas, tools.
Yes, to stay focused in what our preparation is. So I studied my music in college, but they don't give us any. We have pedagogy. I'm sorry, but they don't give us any training in Dalcross, Kodali, Suzuki, none of that. So we are catching a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I found a video like this, so I found this video, they share, and we are like grabbing everything we can from wherever we can, and well, this is my experience, and I am very, very grateful for Veronica first for inviting teachers from Mexico to be here, and I saw the activities you create, and I was thinking, oh my God, I do without knowing. I was doing that cross, so that was very beautiful for me, because I then that was when I realized I was prepared. I was doing the right thing. My classes were in the right path. So, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult. I have learned a lot, and thank you all, and that's me. Thank you.
Very good. We have about 7 minutes, so let's see if we can get a couple in. Fabian, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. I think it's important to realize or to think about not only what do we give. If I look back to the times when I had to look for a job here or there, where do I start? Where do I get the possibility to teach eurythmics? It started from a strong self-confidence that had grown during the 4-5 years of studies. And then I knew that I'm able to create something. So I knew I could always create something with a group, even if there's no instrument, even if in the room wouldn't be a piano. If I have my voice and my presence and my competence that I have learned in the eurythmics studies, in this integral view of participating and sharing something with other people, connecting relationship, creating self-competence, access to their own emotions, to more mobility, to the musicality. So I think the starting point is this awareness that we can create something. Not only what I can give, but I know if I'm in the middle of a group with my background, I can create something that's valuable for each person in their own way. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a Dalcrozian over the years and as a teacher, it's that part, the fact that as I'm teaching, I am creating in the moment, that has been like the most exciting part, I have to say, for me, is that I never feel stale. I never feel like I've used it up or that I'm just redoing the same lesson plan. over and over, and trying to help some people who have been brought up through different music education models. That's just like mind blowing to a lot of people who are just kind of like, teaching from the book, and we just do these certain lessons and then it's the same. The idea that we are creative in the moment has always been sort of the most enriching part of this for me. Joanna?
Yeah, I wanted just to thank you very much, both of you. With the partnering, I wanted to make a comment. It's to dare to ask questions, be them out loud or be them in my head. We think, oh, I'm new at this. Who am I to do this, to ask this? And this person and this organization has been existing for God knows how many years. And we need to fight this attitude of not trusting that we are entitled to questions. And the other thing is, at higher educations, those of us that teach at higher educations, we don't have to teach how to do business, the business aspect of being a teacher, but we could ask the administration to teach that, because I have a diploma in illustration, in botanical illustration. We had to do a business model, a year business model and a month business model, what we want to do, and that was included in the program. But I think this idea, the more you care for business, the less you're an artist. This is ridiculous, but it figures in many, many heads.
Well, it's very much in vogue in the States, in music schools now, the conversation about entrepreneurship and different ways of being self-starter and being, opening your own sorts of organizations or all. So most of the music schools in the States now who are offering sort of performance degrees or such have some component around entrepreneurship, but it's still new. It's still a new set of ideas, a new set of principles, and it's barely, in my experience, found its way into the Dalcroze conversation. So it's definitely around, and some of the schools have done more and some have less, but we thought this is a great opportunity. I think we have time for maybe one more. Is anybody else? Oh, Alice?
Okay, hello there. And I wanted to say I was especially pleased to hear both Emma and Guy talk about, I think Emma mentioned Music for Peace, where they brought together, through music, they brought together opposing sides of a conflict. And Guy mentioning his devotion to activism. I always had the dilemma of wanting to be an environmental activism, but that would encroach upon time for music performance and education. And it really brings together that both are really part of the same thing. And I think Dalcroze himself was very egalitarian and taught children from the street. He was, so I was very, very happy. And I think that we have to see music as a force for good. I used to think, what if Ceausescu, the horrible dictator of Romania, if he had had a music education as a child, he could not have turned into the monster that he became. And so I think that we really can tame the hearts and bring that. And I was just so delighted to hear all of you talk about that issue. And I think that's a way of resolving whatever dilemma other people may feel, that through that music education and our willingness to give and to get, especially with parents, with families, it can really be a force for good. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, I think it's a great set of parting ideas, because there's lots here to think about. And it actually is a bit of an overture to an upcoming meetup, probably over the summer. Guy, I think if I understood one of the words that Guy said there in his introduction, was he was saying there was in and through music. And so there's an attention that we know is one of the sort of most popular quotes of Jacques Dalcroze, that it's an education in and through. And so depending on how you interpret that wording, you could see it as two very different agendas. There's an education in music where we're teaching musicianship for the stage, musicianship for performance. And that's really the main thing. And then there's this depending on how you interpret it, maybe a very different set of ideas about I use these methods to learn the musicianship of daily life, or how other parts of my interactions could be like music. And so that both of those things could be addressed. We probably should have at least one meetup where we just talk about that quote as we get going, because there's tons in there. As I understood, what Guy was saying was that a little bit of his agenda is trying to focus like, oh, I can do good by doing good musicianship, is what I heard, some of what I heard him say. And then there is this other, which I think Alice is getting to a little bit, that actually we can also use the ideas for like other sorts of off the stage agendas. And I'm not sure that Guy was saying that he was only doing one, but that we could have these two agendas. So I think we have an upcoming meetup sort of penciled in where we're going to talk about sort of the extra musical experience, using Dalcroze for the extra musical. So stay tuned, folks. There's all kinds of good stuff to talk about. I think we're pretty much at time, but Emma's a co-host and she rose her hand. So
I raised my hand, so I'm going to rudely jump in. No, I just wanted to thank you guys for putting this together. Guy and I don't normally talk about this in public, but we are Dalcroze siblings. I feel like we can share that with the universe. We've studied at the same time. We've had such different lives as musicians and teachers and performers, and it's just a real honor to be here with him today. And I think the truth is that all of us have been transformed in one way or another by this method, which is why we're here. And the power that it has to transform our students and the people we work with, whatever format that is why we have all these questions. And it could never fit into one or even 27 as we're at meetups. And so that's why we hope we'll get to keep going. And I just wanted to say thank you, Guy, to my Dalcroze brother, that I get to be here with you today. But thank you, Stephen and Veronica.
absolutely. Well, thank you to you both so much for presenting. As always, we leave you wanting more. We didn't answer any questions today at all. All we did was ask a bunch, and we hopefully have lots of things to think about and ways to apply. Veronica, do you have any parting words for us?
No, please stay in touch, virtualdalcroze@gmail.com. I answer that email address if you have any ideas or questions. We love to hear from you about what you like and what you want more of.
Yep. If you have ideas for future meetups, if you have ideas for either you or others to present, we would love to hear about that. We are currently hotly planning the summer and fall agendas. So stay tuned and we'll see.
Wait, I think Iramar wanted to jump in quickly.
Oh, yes.
Iramar, yes.
Yes, I didn't see it. Iramar.
Escucha.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabián, tú hablas francés. Tu parles français? Oui.
Fabian, you're muted.
Tu parles français?
Oui, oui, je parle français, oui.
Alors, je vais raconter quelque chose que j'ai vécu, très importante, qui prouve que la rythmique Dalcroze, c'est pas une finalité, c'est simplement un moyen d'être meilleur.
Oui,
Tu
oui.
peux traduire un petit peu en anglais, parce que
En
je
anglais.
vais raconter qu'est-ce qui s'est passé.
So what Iramar told us in French, if I understood well, if I translate well, is that through the work you do with Dalcroze studies or presenting Dalcroze, you become a better person. You transform to something new. You expand your capacity. I think I might add some words of myself. You enlarge the perspective towards other people, which is an aspect that Emma had, and Guy, you too, when you engage in institutions. So it's widening our capacity to share the love for our life and the respect that we have in moving together and listening to music and following the music.
Oui, alors je vais raconter mon expérience. À l'année 2 ans en arrière, j'étais allé à Karlsruhe, en Allemagne, voir le lac des Cygnes, parce que les 2 interprètes, c'était 2 Brésiliens. Tu peux traduire?
He wants to tell us something that he experienced in Karlsruhe 2 years ago when he saw two Brazilians on stage.
Un stage, c'était Swan
Okay.
Lake. Swan Lake. Et quand c'était tellement beau, merveilleux,
It was so
expressif
nice.
et musical, j'étais à dire à ces danseurs, je vous présente, je suis professeur à Genève et je vous félicite. Vous êtes les deux les meilleurs dalcrosiens que j'ai vus. Ils m'ont dit, c'est qui Dalcroze?
Okay, he gave his compliments to the two dancers because he was so impressed and touched by how they moved, and he told them, I give you this compliments as a professor for Dalcroze rhythmics, and they asked, who is this person?
Et je les ai dit, je vais vous envoyer quelques articles sur Dalcroze.
So he said he will
C'était
send them some
vraiment
information.
une gesticulation, un respect à la phrase, un respect à la musique, un respect au geste du jamais vu. J'étais très ému.
So he says he was very touched because these two dancers were so much in the detail of the gesture of, and as I understand, completely true to themselves and to the expression that was transportable through the music.
Ouais. Donc, en résumé, ça ne veut pas dire qu'on est dalcrosien, qu'on est le meilleur du monde, le meilleur musicien. Pas du tout. Il y a des dalcrosiens qui ne savent pas son nom, mais qui des gens qui vivent la musique avec les corps et pour les corps.
I think you might understand Iramar also by his gestures. Not only, it's not enough to be a Dalcroze teacher to think that we are the better ones, but if we connect with the music in this deep way that we have learned how it could be, then we are on the way to be a better person. C'est ça?
Oui.
Plus ou moins.
Une idée que Dalcroze disait toujours à ses élèves, qui étaient mes professeurs, qui dit, tu ne dois jamais dire je sais.
Okay,
Je dois
never
savoir.
say you know. Never say you know. And that's something that Dalcroze said. Don't ever say you know.
Very good. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
to everyone. Thank you, Iramar. Thank you, Fabian.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, and Guy and
Thank you,
Emma, thank you so
Veronica.
much for participating. We will check out the calendar on the website. We will see everybody soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Stephen. Bye-bye, Iramar. Bye, Selma.